This is what I believe in. I think this is what we believe in. And it doesn't necessarily make it the right way. I don't want to come across like I have it all figured out, but this is the way that we think. This is the way that we do things. And we try to do that to the best of our abilities.
There's a really good question here about analysis, which I really like, from Pedro Elias. I'd like to ask about Jesse's opinion on match analysis, both opponents and your own team. How does the staff coordinate this work, and how many people are responsible for these roles?
Yeah, we have, we really value our video analysts and our data analysts. So we have a vast network. And we have, these coaches are everywhere around Europe now. The Bayern Munich video analyst is a Red Bull analyst. The Southampton, you could go to PSV. There's so many clubs now that have used our analysts because they're trying to tilt a little bit more to playing our football. And in general, when we're looking at opponents, and it's one of the things I like the most about playing in Champions League, is you have to have a really good match plan when you play against the best teams. So we use our principles and our ideas of how we play football, and then we form tactics and match plans around how we try to attack certain things with the ball, where we try to attack against the ball, and what we try to achieve. So that winds up being really important and actually a lot of fun. So yeah, the combination of our analysts, our match plans, our principles, and putting them all together so that against the best opponents, you give yourself a chance.
Got a really good question here from Chris Summersell that you may or may not choose to answer. But we've talked a lot about the way that your teams give other teams problems. But are there any particular styles of play that your teams have had problems with, and how have you dealt with this?
What's interesting is even when I showed that data from our running data from the game, that was from inside our league. And as good as the games are in Champions League, actually the intensity, the running intensity we experience in our league here in Austria is at a higher level than even what we're playing in Champions League. So I'm not saying that the Austrian league is clearly not as good as Champions League or Premier League, but in terms of the intensity at which the game is played, Red Bull football has had such a big impact on football overall in Austria that games are played with major intensity. That challenges us at times. But obviously what we find in Champions League is even more than that is the quality of attacking players. Playing against Atletico Madrid, they like to play deeper in a block. And so for us to try to break them down, but also not allow them to catch us on the counter, just think about, again, what I said about strategy. Actually, now they are achieved there by sitting deeper. They're inviting us to play more with the ball, and then they're waiting for us to lose it or for them to win it and then attack us with transition in the other direction. So strategically, they're trying to combat what we're trying to achieve and do to us what we're trying to do to them. So yeah, then you're trying to now figure out, okay, what do we want to do with the ball? What areas do we want to attack? What areas do we want to make sure we protect? How do we still find a way to do what we want to do on the day? In the end, we didn't do it well enough.
Maybe next season. Actually, there's a question from Yagis Chekhem, I hope I pronounced that right, who asks quite simply, what is the best tactical solution to score against low block defending?
So one thing is counter pressing. What we find is, again, when we saw that video that I showed when we counter pressed, is a lot of times when teams win the ball back, they get relaxed or they feel like they're back in control of the game. So sometimes against a deep block, we say that we want to play in tight spaces and we want to play with combinations. And at times we almost want to lose the ball because then we can counter press because we're all in good spaces and we're ball orientated. And when we win the ball, we can play very vertically and the other team is relaxed for a moment and we can catch them that way. So that's still a tactic that we use. And then there's other things that we try to do with manipulating possession and finding different areas and chip balls behind the opponent. But the counter pressing still winds up being an important strategy against a low block team.
That's really interesting. Actually, on that note, Russell Pope comes in with, does fixture congestion, which is obviously very, very apt to where we are at the minute, does fixture congestion affect your high pressing style? Is there an extra risk of injury that are you altering the manners in which you press as a result of that concern?
So like you saw even in the videos that sometimes we're a little bit more compact, sometimes we're a little bit higher. Sometimes we're controlling the rhythm at which the game is played, but what we do with the ball and without the ball. And then I rotate players a lot. Like I believe in a big roster, and especially when you coach young players, if you want your young players to be brave, then guess who has to be the bravest? The coach. So I have to engage and sometimes take risks with younger players on the pitch. But what I found is that more often than not, I'm incredibly rewarded by what these players can deliver. So we rotate here in Germany, when you play 3 games in a week, they call it an Englische Woche, an English week, because we know that's how everybody plays there so much. But it's important to rotate, have fresh legs, get the balance right within the team. And again, give young players chances to play. It's the only way they can develop.
On the topic of young players, we've had actually a few questions about the ideas of teaching pressing and counter pressing with younger players. So do you implement the same tactics and strategies in your academy? And one here from Matthew Lowe says, how would you recommend teaching pressing and counter pressing at youth level? Principles, cues, types of activities that can be used to develop this type of football?
So first of all, I mean, one of the reasons why we love young players is not just because they're adaptable and they grow so quickly, but we need young legs on the pitch because they can usually run, faster, longer, and more repetitively than older legs. I learned that as an older player. And then, we taught when we were shaping the New York Red Bulls Academy, we were talking a lot about, okay, how much do we want to build the game up and teach them technically how to manipulate the ball and tactically how to be with the ball before we're teaching them to break it down and run against the ball and win duels and win and Rhein-Gain and these kinds of things. But I find that it's about controlling the environment, right? Like ultimately in training, what we're doing is trying to raise the speed of play by how big the spaces are, by what the numbers are, by how many neutrals, what the rules are. And then ultimately their talents are going to be raised a little bit with the ball, against the ball, everything. And then it's our job as coaches, again, to raise the intensity and the level at which they're playing and almost make it over their heads so they react and grow and get better. So I actually find that these with the ball, against the ball themes and how you manage them and manipulate them within how you create your training sessions, that they work together, right? And that's part of the skill of a coach in training, is understanding how to manipulate training. So without always, we say a lot that if a 14-year-old is good, he needs to train with 16-year-olds. Okay, that's a way of artificially creating that. But the best young coaches and the best professional coaches are able to do that within a training session by how they manipulate rules, regulations, spaces, numbers to get that. So that's one of the ways that we really also create development and speed of thought, is by manipulating training.
We've talked a lot about teams pressing, but Lewis Dunwoody comes in with this one, which is a good one. People talk about the press resistance of football players now, particularly with the way of current pressing trends. How can a player's press resistance be measured or quantified? Or should it be? Or is it just a subjective concept?
I'm not familiar with press resistance. However, how I would interpret that is the efficiency at which their pressing is functional or in which it works. And we measure that. We measure by how many times they win balls, how many attacks they have on the opponent, how many times they're in the zone to help be the second wave of players. So, and then we positionally have goals that we try to have them hit every game, and then we compare them against each other. And it winds up almost being a fun competition when we post at the end of the game all of our statistics. And we have statistics that everyone measures, or that certain companies measure and use. And then we have our own that our analysts use. And then we post those after every game. And there's often banter in the locker room, which is ideally what we want. We want them to be driven internally to do the things we want, to feel the way we want to play. And I think, what we find in this in general is, as much as this is a difficult way of playing and it requires a big physical output, there's also a contagiousness to the feeling of overwhelming the opponent by outrunning them, by pressing them, by giving them no time on the ball, by eliminating the things that they want to try to achieve. And that usually gets spread throughout the team, and it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So Yeah, that's part of the fun, I think.
This is my own question, but bearing in mind what you just described and the importance of pressing and the importance of players having that desire and that willing to run. Do you look at a player? Do you think now that a player like Mesut Özil, who of course is argued about all the time, not particularly renowned for that being part of his game, is there still a role in football for a player like him?
Yes, I mean, but again, for any player, I think what's important is, does his style of play fit the style of play of what the club is trying to achieve or what the coach is trying to achieve? So, I mean, I think Mesut Ozil, for example, is an incredibly talented player whose career was totally sidetracked, and sadly so, because when he was at his best, he was a pleasure to watch, and certainly very effective. But then now, as the intensity in England grew and grew and grew, then it became more and more difficult for Mesut to be good at the things that he does. Could he have found a trainer that still carved out a role for him? Potentially so, and maybe he'll find that in Turkey now. But again, outside of the world's greatest players like Ronaldo and Messi, these kinds of players can almost play in any type of style. But certainly, when you look at the way we play, we're not going to be going after a player like Lionel Messi. It just doesn't make sense, right? And that's not saying anything against Lionel Messi, because he's the best player in the history of the world. But I think for a coach, for a player, for anyone, finding the right fit and making sure that everything is aligned, like I've said before, is what dictates success of the individual and the group.
We have one last question. Time for one last question before we have to wrap up. It feels appropriate that we end it with a question about Red Bull and terminology, as that plays such a large part today. Marco van der Heijden comes in. I hear you speak about against the ball rather than defending when pressing. You use the word attacking when you talk about pressing. Is this done deliberately? Is this Red Bull vocabulary? Is this your vocabulary?
Attacking is always. Yeah, I mean, again. We use sometimes in terminology, German, it would be we don't say ball possession and against the ball. We say attacking with the ball and attacking against the ball, because it's important, again, to match the tactics with the mentality, right? And the more that we are understanding and the more that we are clear with the strategy, what we're trying to achieve, the mentality, the togetherness, on and off the pitch, the clearer that we are with each other about our identity, the easier it is for everybody to fulfill their roles within whatever role they have here in our club. So, and I think that the players really feel a power to the sense that there's a togetherness on the pitch, tactically and mentally, and that power frees them to be their best, frees them to go after games, frees them even in the best games against Bayern Munich or Liverpool to show their best version of themselves. Now, in some of these games, we've given up too many goals in almost all of them. So we're always trying to manage our aggressiveness in the right ways. But in the end, this is who we are. This is what I believe in. I think this is what we believe in. And it doesn't necessarily make it the right way. I don't want to come across like I have it all figured out. But this is the way that we think. This is the way that we do things. And we try to do that to the best of our abilities.